On the afternoon, the consequences began. Mara Alvarez stood in the checkout line at Cedar Ridge Electronics with a basket that felt heavier than it should have, not because of its contents. Printer ink, a USB cable, batteries, practical items chosen with adult logic, but because of what was missing. While beside her, Leo shifted his weight from foot to foot in his faded hoodie, the hood half up like a shield, his fingers buried deep in his pockets as if he could physically hold himself together. And when he reminded her for the fourth time that the game was on sale today, that this was the only day it would be cheaper, she responded with the measured patience she'd perfected over years of parenting alone, telling him they had already discussed it, that he owned other games, that wanting something didn't automatically mean needing it, and that life didn't pause just because Galaxy Raiders 7 released this week. And Leo nodded, tight and silent, in that brittle way children do when they realize arguing won't help, and something inside them quietly rearranges itself instead. The cashier rang them up, the receipt printed, the moment passed, and Mara assumed, incorrectly, that this was simply another small disappointment among many. But that night the house felt off, too quiet. And when Leo didn't come down for dinner, and she climbed the stairs, calling his name with irritation already forming, she found him sitting on his bed, staring at the blank console screen like it had personally wronged him, telling her he wasn't hungry. And then, when she pushed, saying he was done, a word she dismissed as dramatic until it started echoing in subtle ways over the following days. Because the next afternoon her phone buzzed during a meeting with the school's number on the screen, and the vice principal carefully explained that Leo had refused to participate in group work, telling his teacher there was no point in trying if you couldn't win anyway, a statement that didn't match the curious, engaged kid Mara knew. And when she tried to talk to him that evening, she was met with efficient distance, shrugs, one-word answers, eyes fixed anywhere but her face, as if a door had begun closing slowly and methodically, click by click, without slamming, until the consequences became impossible to ignore during the lead-up to the school science fair, an event Leo usually loved, where he had excitedly signed up to design a simple game prototype and spent months sketching mechanics, coding small systems, imagining how players would interact, only for Mara to walk into his room the night before the fair and find him deleting the entire project with a calm finality that chilled her, telling her he was quitting because it didn't matter, because effort only counted if you already had access, because some kids got to play and some were always watching from the sidelines. And those words hurt more than shouting ever could, especially when he showed up the next day with nothing to present. His teacher using the phrase missed opportunity in a tone that followed Mara home and lingered like a bruise. The consequences didn't stop with Leo, but began circling Mara herself as she caught glimpses of her own patterns in the quiet moments. How quickly she defaulted to no, how often she equated discipline with denial, how she treated joy as something to be earned later rather than experienced now, how she assumed she understood what mattered to her son without actually asking him. And she started to suspect that responsibility without empathy was just control wearing responsible clothes, a realization that sat uncomfortably with her until a rainy Saturday afternoon pushed everything into the open, when she found Leo in the living room watching a live stream of other kids playing Galaxy Raiders 7, their voices overlapping with laughter and excitement, while Leo sat motionless, not smiling, not reacting, just absorbing it. And when she suggested he play something else, he muted the stream and finally asked if she wanted to know why he'd wanted the game in the first place, explaining after a pause that it wasn't about the game itself or owning something shiny and new, but about being where his friends were, about feeling included in conversations at school, about not being the kid who was always behind the curve. And he told her he hadn't needed it forever, just enough to feel seen, just enough for her to understand why it mattered to him. And in that moment, Mara realized that the real consequence of her decision hadn't been tantrums or rebellion or defiance, but distance. A quiet, widening gap built from feeling unheard. The next morning, she drove back to Cedar Ridge Electronics, noticing the irony that the sale was over and the price higher, paying it anyway without resentment, And when she handed Leo the game later that day, she didn't frame it as a reward for good behavior or an exception to her rules, but as an apology, telling him she should have listened before deciding. And Leo looked at the box and then at her with an expression that mixed relief and caution, telling her softly that she didn't always have to say yes, just that she shouldn't decide for him what mattered. And although the trust between them didn't instantly reset or magically fix itself, it began to loosen and repair in small ways as he showed her the game's worlds, the teamwork involved, the excitement of shared experiences she'd dismissed simply because they were unfamiliar, teaching her that sometimes the most lasting consequences aren't loud or dramatic or immediate, but quiet and relational, unfolding over time, and that the cost of not buying a game was never really about money at all, but about the space that opens when listening stops and how much effort it takes to close it again.